inflation's going higher, maybe much higher. The only thing that's going to keep it down is, to some degree, there's going to be deregulation going on under Trump, hopefully. And that will tamp down inflation because there'll be more production as a result.
Welcome to In It to Win It. This is Steve Barton, and thank you for tuning in. Today, we're honored to welcome back Doug Casey, renowned investor, author, and the original international man with decades of experience navigating global markets and uncovering opportunities in crisis. Doug is a leading voice on economics, liberty, and living the life unconventionally. He's here to share his unique insights on wealth, freedom, and the state of the world. Doug, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. In my case, here is out on the farm in Uruguay at the moment.
Awesome. I've never been to Uruguay. I've been to South and Central America, but never that country. So have to put it on the list.
It's a quiet little place. Like, this is my backyard, if you can see it.
Oh, tilt the camera up slightly. Oh, wow.
So there's some cattle out there in the next field, and beyond that, the corn crop, and beyond that, the tree crop. Trees are actually a major lumber, I should say, are a major export from here in Uruguay. So, and I don't know if you saw my noble dog in the picture, Oscar, a mighty young poodle who is unique in Uruguay. He's the only one that exists down here.
That's cool. I also saw the telescope. Are you a kind of a amateur astronomer?
Yeah, I like to look at the stars at night, but I also like to use it to look at what's going on out in the fields out there with the cows and all that during the day. So it's dual purpose.
That's cool. I've got a telescope as well. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to constellations and stuff. Okay, let's start out like we always do. And what is your macro view of the world economy and financial markets today?
Well, the big thing that's happened in the last few months, certainly, well, there are a lot of big things that have happened, but in the United States, it's the fact that Kamala, that means how bad in Spanish, didn't win the election. If the Democrats had won, they would further have cemented themselves into office, and we'd just be in for a world of trouble. Now, that's not to say I really support Donald Trump. I've got a lot of issues with his policies, but from every point of view, he's vastly better than the Jacobins that run the Democrat Party. Now, how the Democrats are going to react to what he tries to do and fight against them, sure, we're going to see lots of lawsuits, lots of slow rolling, probably some riots, maybe some more things like what just happened in Las Vegas and New Orleans. Who knows? These things are, we don't get good information on that. Certainly nothing that comes out of the government is reliable. So in any event, big picture, yeah, it's a good thing that Trump is in office by comparison to the alternative. And that gives me a certain sense of optimism. It's morning in America. That's the good news. But the bad news is that morning only lasts 6 hours.
Okay. I feel like we saw a bit of that, like as soon as the election was decided and, Kamala didn't win, gold dropped by a couple $100. And I think a lot of that was she was talking about, doing price controls. I mean, the stuff that we saw with Nixon that, 7 minutes worth of research on Google will tell you that doesn't work. And what you end up with is no groceries. She was talking about taxing unrealized capital gains. Like, okay, well then the bet is no longer the stock market. I guess we just all buy physical gold. So I think like that risk was taken off the table, and we could see that in the price of gold. And I'm with you. I think that Trump may not be the ideal person, but at least he's better than the alternative.
Oh, yeah. He wants to roll back DEI, which is a completely stupid, evil, and vicious program, diversity, equity, and inclusion. He wants to roll back ESG. What the hell does that stand for? Same type of thing. It's a leftist meme. These are good things. So I'll take what I can get. But I think that the trend, which has been established for some years, is that Western civilization is sliding downhill. The United States has peaked as a power. Actually, it's turned into a global multicultural empire, frankly, and it's heading downhill too. So I see the Trump administration as, at best, throwing some sand on the slippery slope, because Trump will continue spending. He's a big debt guy. He's always said that. That's his modus operandi. He's a big spender. That's all bad news. But the good news is that he'll try to deregulate and perhaps succeed with the help of Elon and Vivek. So on the whole, things look better now than they did a few months ago.
Yeah. Okay. Nautica has a question on inflation. He's basically saying, how bad do you foresee inflation getting in the United States, and how can we, profit from it or bet on it?
Well, inflation is going to go much higher. And the reason for that is that the government runs, let's say, a $2 trillion per year deficit. And the American people aren't buying the debt. The Chinese aren't buying the debt. Who's buying that $2 trillion that the government needs to finance every year? It's the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve buys it by printing up more dollars and depositing those dollars in commercial bank accounts of the U.S. government, where it spends it on what it wants in the society. Now, that's funny money. That's super money. It's created out of nothing. So, yes, inflation is going higher. There's no way it's not going higher. And with the world head over heels in debt, lots of money it's not just the U.S. government, almost $37 trillion, but corporate debt, individual debt, everything from automobile debt to student loans to mortgage debt to credit card debt. If that debt is not financed, we'll have a credit collapse, similar to what happened in 1929. So they want to keep that from happening above all. So the answer to the question is no question about it. Inflation is going higher, maybe much higher. The only thing that's going to keep it down is, to some degree, there's going to be deregulation going on under Trump, hopefully. And that will tamp down inflation, because there'll be more production as a result. So, you've got to bet on inflation, and you've got to invest expecting inflation.
Okay. All right. So increasing inflation, that's not going to stop, but hopefully it'll slow down a little bit from deregulation.
That's the bottom line, right? They're going to keep debasing the currency. There's no way out. It's inflate or die.
Yeah. Okay. You're a big fan of Argentina, so much so that you bought a house and lived down there a lot of the year. Last time we talked, we were talking about Milei and all the changes that had come around. That was about 6 or 8 months ago. Tell us about Argentina, give us the cliff notes, and give us an update since the last time we talked. How's it looking down there?
Well, the election of Javier Milei is one of the most important things that's ever happened politically in the modern world. Why? Because Milei is an overt and announced and sincere and knowledgeable anarcho-capitalist. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm an anarcho-capitalist. And we have lots of mutual friends, although I have not as yet met him. I presume I will at some point. But an anarcho-capitalist does not believe in the government's right to exist. We don't want just a small government. We want the government to be disbanded and go away. We believe that there's nothing that is needed and wanted in society that won't be provided by entrepreneurs and by members of society themselves in trading, producing and consuming in a free market. Okay, so this is historic. And the fact that he was elected by young people mainly, and he came out of nowhere without the backing of a political party, really, and with all of the deep state and the unions and everybody against him, he still won, mainly because the young people especially just wanted to get the monkey of the government off their backs. And he's now more popular than when he was elected. He's turned off the printing presses, and inflation's gone from 400 or 500%, which it was a year ago. It's running like 30 or 40% now, on its way to zero. The Argentine government is running a budget surplus, which is absolutely unique and unheard of. And what's he doing with the surplus? He's cutting taxes, firing government employees, cutting regulations, abolishing government agencies. Answer to the question is that the Argentine stock market has doubled in the last year. Okay, that's great. I think it's going to go a lot higher. Property prices, and I actually own a lot of property in Argentina as well as Uruguay, hasn't really moved yet, but it will. And my prediction is this. It's going to be one of the freest and most prosperous countries in the world over the next few years, maybe over the next decade or more, if he can ingrain the changes he's making into the society, into the government of Argentina. So this is real cause for optimism.
Huh. That's okay. That's awesome to hear. Okay, so anarcho-capitalist, which basically means, like you, that you don't believe that government can exist. Entrepreneurs can provide that service. Inflation went from 400 to 500% per year, down to 30 to 40%, which is amazing.
Which is still way too high, but it's on its way to zero.
Yeah.
And another important thing is, as in El Salvador, which is another country in Latin America, it used to be the second worst place in the Western Hemisphere after Haiti. And now it's actually one of the most, probably the most crime-free place in the Western Hemisphere. It's amazing how quickly these things can change. But Argentina is going to be better. It's got a lot more sound fundamentals than El Salvador does.
Yeah. Okay. And he's actually running a surplus now, which is unheard of in governments. And he's using that to cut taxes.
But the important thing, he's using it to abolish taxes, not just cut them, but abolish lots of taxes. Because there's many, many types of taxes here in Argentina, more than there are in the U.S. It's made business almost impossible in Argentina unless you're wired and hooked up with the government.
Okay. All right. So you see this as like, assuming that he can keep this in place when he passes the football off to the next guy,
well, he can be reelected in 4 years or 3 years now. And I think he will be.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that is fantastic to hear. Okay. So that kind of parlays into Courtney's question. She says, what are the best investment opportunities at present in Argentina for U.S. investors?
Well, there's two things you can do. You can buy stocks or you can buy property. And stocks have, as I said, doubled. And there's a lot of upside left in the stock market. I don't want to get into individual names. There's an ETF for Argentina. But real estate is what I've mainly done here in Argentina because it's extremely cheap. and it's still extremely cheap. I mean, if you look at an apartment in Buenos Aires, if you go towards the top of the market, okay, Upper East Side, New York kind of stuff, you can get stuff here in Argentina in the Recoleta for about 5% of what the same apartment would cost you in New York. That's a big discount.
Wow.
And Buenos Aires is a more desirable place to live than New York, as far as I'm concerned. So that makes a lot of sense. And the country is going to boom. Same is true of agricultural property. Productive farmland is, I'd say a third, maybe a quarter, what its equivalent would be in Iowa, Kansas, whatever.
Wow. Okay. What about like I really like being on the beach. I was looking at property down in Nicaragua recently, and then thank God the deal fell through because eminent domain took over and they just ran a highway right through where I was looking. But what would an acre go for around I don't know, not developed beach area yet, but kind of up and coming? Have you looked into any of them?
No, and of course Argentina has a couple thousand miles of oceanfront.
Yeah.
Uh, what happens is 40% of the population of Argentina, which is about 40 million people, more or less, and Argentina is the seventh largest country in the world. It's a big country. Um, when Argentines want to go to the beach, they generally go across the Plate River to Uruguay, where I am now, mainly to the resort town. It's a jet set town, Punta del Este. And Uruguay is pretty expensive. Everything from meals and restaurants to houses cost you just about what they cost in the US,
Yeah.
pending. So, answer to the question, I don't know what we're talking about right now in terms of oceanfront or beachfront in Argentina, but it's pretty cheap and there's a lot available.
Okay.
But I'm not on top of that particular segment of the market.
Okay. All right. Speaking of Uruguay, Andrew has a question. Do you have any concerns of Uruguay heading towards socialism politically?
Well, most people are not aware of the fact that I think it was like 1902, Uruguay was, along with Sweden, same year or about the same year, declared itself as an officially socialist country, first in the world or second after Sweden. And Uruguay is pretty much like Sweden. It's kind of a mellow and garden variety type of socialism. The army here is totally not important. The military in Uruguay, totally unimportant. They don't bother you. It's by South American standards, it's probably the least corrupt country in Latin America, which is a double-edged sword. Good thing, bad thing. I could talk about why. Trouble with Uruguay is that they have lots of welfare benefits, medical care for everybody. But all right, so I like Uruguay. I like being here. Being there, it's a very low crime country. The government doesn't bother me at all. So it's mellow from that point of view. Is it going to turn into a communist dictatorship or something like that? No, it's a very socially stable country. It's a farming country, and farming countries don't do well for radical socialism. It's a welfare state, not a socialist state, put it that way. It's a welfare state. That's not good. Will that change under the influence of Milei when the Uruguayans see the Argentines becoming very wealthy just across the Plate River? Will they roll back some of the stupid welfare things that they have in this country? Well, it's possible. But no, it's not going to get, I don't see it getting worse, even though they elected a leftist as the in the recent elections as the new president, replacing a rightist. Okay, not much difference. The important thing with Uruguay is it's a sociologically and a demographically stable country. I think that's the important thing to remember with Uruguay. Stupid welfare state, yes, but otherwise, it's quite livable, I assure you.
Okay. All right.
Be here otherwise. I would never farm here otherwise. But, there's hardly any place in the world that is a real free market, okay? So you've just got to choose your poison and hope the cyanide is not too concentrated in whichever one you choose to drink.
Well put. Well put. Okay. Kaz wants to know, he's asking about royalty companies, and he said, do you buy and hold royalty companies, or do you sell when you think the commodity cycle has peaked?
Well, the commodity cycle right now for metals, or frankly, all commodities, there are some exceptions. Some commodities have run up a lot, like cocoa and coffee, for instance, have run up a lot. But the grains are very cheap, but there really aren't any royalty companies for those things. I'm talking about commodities, but let's talk about the royalty companies. And the royalty companies are metals. The problem with royalty companies is there used to be just one, Franco-Nevada. It was exceptionally successful, founded by Pierre Lassonde, who's an old friend of mine. But seeing the success of royalties, giving companies that don't have money in order to develop their properties, and then collecting a royalty on the deposit on the mine for forever, usually. There have been a lot of Me Too companies that have come up. I don't know how many royalty companies there are now. 24, I'm guessing. So that's the problem with royalty companies, is there are more royalty companies out there offering money to companies. The terms that they're able to get aren't as good as they used to be. So I'm a big holder of a royalty company that I was the founder of, called Metalla. I bought it. I still own it. I'll continue to own it. But let's say there's a mania that develops in gold and gold stocks. Yeah, of course I'll sell it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because these things fluctuate radically. These little mining stocks fluctuate extremely radically, more than any other kind of stock, more than biotech stocks, more than computer stocks. They haven't gone anywhere for several years. They've been bouncing along the bottom. But when they run, as a group, they generally run 10-1. And this has happened 5 times in the last 50 years, incidentally. It's not a number I just picked out of the air. I think that's going to happen again. And when it does happen again, yeah, I'm going to sell almost all of them. And hopefully, productive industrial companies in the U.S. will have gone down a lot, and I'll be able to sell these crappy little mining companies for a big buck and buy solid companies that yield high dividends cheaply. So that's my plan. Answer to the question, absolutely you want to sell them.
Okay. Yeah.
But close to the bottom. So don't think about selling now. Think about selling. Look, I always say, think about selling when a golden bear is on the front cover of Newspeak or Slime, should they still exist, tearing apart the New York Stock Exchange. That's the key. That's when you know that time to sell gold and buy New York Stock Exchange stocks. So hold your royalty companies kind of until that happens.
Okay. Buy undervaluation and sell overvaluation. But we're not at the overvalued stage yet.
Nowhere near it.
Okay. Angel wants to know, do you believe that the gold miners will finally break out this year?
Well, I thought they would have broken out a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, last year ago, but they haven't. The the Vancouver Stock Exchange Index, okay, which comprehends stocks traded in Vancouver, almost all resource stocks. We're talking gold, silver, copper, nickel, oil, gas, this type of thing. That's almost all of the VSC. And it's bouncing around 600 on that index. And it's been there for basically for years. Is this the magic year? Well, I'd like to believe it is, but yeah. But I could be wrong because I've been wrong for the last several years. It's just going nowhere. The main way I invest, well, I don't invest. You can only speculate in these stocks. That's a distinction that ought to be drawn. But and I probably should define the difference between investing and speculating. Investing is where you put $1 someplace in order to actually just produce something and grow another ear of corn, that type of thing. Speculating is where you find an asset that you think is underpriced, and it's a guess in a way, an educated guess. So it's all speculating with these stocks. But I mainly speculate in them by buying private placements from the companies. By doing so, I can get a good sized position without moving the market because they're generally thinly traded. I can usually get them at a discount to the market. And most important, I'll always get a warrant to buy more stocks over the next 2 years, 3 years, sometimes 5 years. So that's how I speculate in them. That's how I've kept my head above water. But is this going to be the year? Well, I'd like to think so. I'm betting that way. We'll see if I'm right, but nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All righty. Let's see. Stuck on the 401k. Oh, let's do platinum. Nautica says, platinum seems historically undervalued compared to gold and silver. What are your thoughts on stacking physical platinum and exchanging it for gold and silver as the ratio reverts?
Well, you can kind of forget about historical ratios between the metals because platinum is a high technology metal. Same with palladium, which is easily substitutable in many cases for platinum. It depends on what the uses is, whether there's a new use developed or an old use goes away, like for instance, catalytic converters in cars. Maybe, if governments have anything to say about it, there won't be any more internal combustion engines in 10 years. Well, that's not going to happen. But still, there's all kinds of things that influence the ratios between these metals. And it's true, historically, gold has been roughly the same price as platinum. Now, platinum is about a third the price of gold or something on that order. But look, it's a question of what's the mining situation like in Russia and in South Africa? Because those are the two countries that produce almost all of the palladium and platinum in the world. So that's one bet you're making. Will there be less production in either of those two countries? Yeah, pretty good bet. That's bullish for platinum. Oh, I don't have any particular opinion on platinum. It is relatively cheap right now. So is palladium.
Okay. But you're saying just because the ratio is skewed one way now doesn't mean that it has to revert like it has over history, that things could change in the industrial complex, that we may not use them as much as we used to.
It's a technology question and a political question as much as anything else. Look, for many years, the U.S. government fixed the price of silver to gold at, I think it was 17 to 1. And everybody was saying, well, there's a historic relationship between gold and silver. Well, no, that changed radically. Now it's like 85 to 1. So don't rely on these ratios between metals.
Okay.
It's a long-term proposition.
That makes sense. Okay, Antonio says you're a prolific author. You've written a lot of books. He says, what books of yours are the best to read with today's environment?
Well, I suggest you read the novels because they're fun to read. They're full of lots of hard information, and you can say things in novel form, nonfiction form, that you probably better shouldn't say in fiction form that you better not say in nonfiction form. So the three novels, which are available on Amazon, are Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin. There's supposed to be four more as our hero, Charles Knight, goes through more and more radical occupations and justifies that their existence, and says a speculator is not a bad guy, a drug lord doesn't have to be a bad guy, an assassin doesn't have to be a bad guy. So they're radical novels, but well written, fun to read, exciting. Yeah, read the novels.
Okay, the High Ground series. Alrighty, is there anything I should have asked, Doug, that I didn't? Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I think 2025 is going to be a very turbulent year. What we just saw happen in Syria, where the old government was overthrown and ceased to exist, and Syria is no longer one country; it's probably three or four countries. So it's going to be chaos in the Middle East. People have forgotten that Libya, for instance, this is never mentioned in the news. It's no longer one country. It's two, really three countries. It's never mentioned. Same thing with Syria now. And the same might easily happen in a number of countries in Africa, absolutely in Africa, and other places in the world. The only thing I hope for is that the U.S. government doesn't stick its nose into those tar babies, those hornets' nests in the future, but it probably will, because the U.S. has a giant military. Trump likes the giant military. He's going to wind up using it in some stupid place. And even though he says he doesn't want to get involved in another war, and I believe him, he will, because of the kind of people that wind up in Washington and surround him. And yeah, so it's going to be an exciting year, not to mention the turbulence that we're undoubtedly going to see here in the U.S.
Yeah. Okay. So increased chaos in the Middle East and probably the U.S. as well. Alrighty. Well,
Yeah,
thank
the
you very
war
much.
and the war in the Ukraine is not over yet. So, and who knows where the next Ukraine or Gaza lookalike will pop up. Could be in a number of places.
Do you think he'll actually be able to end that?
Well, the chances of it ending are much, much better than with the Bidenistas in office, because these stupid Bidenistas wouldn't even talk to the Russians. And when you're talking about two countries with nuclear weapons, not having a red phone that you can use to talk things over and make sure you understand each other, it's criminally insane. So the good thing about Trump is, he'll talk to Putin, and it's possible for a compromise to be arrived at, and hopefully that slimy little criminal that's running the Ukraine right now. So far, what we know is he's stolen about $500 million personally. Maybe it's more like $1 billion at this point. Who knows? He'll be out of office. That's important and necessary. He's turned the Ukraine into a police state in the course of fighting this war that's unnecessarily, stupidly killed. No, nobody knows what the numbers are, but probably killed 500,000 Ukrainian young men. So yeah, I think it's going to come to an end. Yeah, I do. So this is another good thing about Kamala not having been elected.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, Doug, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. If anyone wants to follow you and your work, how can they do so?
Well, you can go on YouTube. I have a roughly weekly podcast called Doug Casey's Take on YouTube. And also, we have a free blog, which is absolutely excellent, if I do say so, where I write for it regularly, and so does like David Stockman, who was Reagan's OMB director. That's at internationalman.com. So go to those two places and go on Amazon and pick up those books. I think you'll be very pleased.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Doug. We will put links to those down in the show notes so you guys can pick them up down there. Doug, this was a real pleasure. Thank you for coming back on the show.
It's nice to be with you, Steve. I'll talk to you later after something big happens.
Okay. Sounds good. And thank you for tuning in. Be sure to support the show and share this with anyone that you think needs to hear it. It's probably your buddy that can't stop talking about tech stocks. You have yourself a great rest of the day, and we will talk to you next time.